أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد بن عبد الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الأرجاس وطهرهم من الأدناس وجعل مودتهم أجرا على الناس ولا سيما على بقية الله في الأرضين الإمام المنتظر صاحب الزمان عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف ابن هداة المهديين وعلى صحبهم الأخيار المنتجبين وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين والشهداء والمجاهدين في سبيل الله منذ آدم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال الله عز وجل في القرآن الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. People are driven or prompted, or they function, generally speaking, in accordance with or steered by their worldview or their fundamental ideologies. So, theists, as opposed to atheists, theists who believe in a deity will, and those who strongly believe in a deity, whether they be monotheists or polytheists, those who believe in some divine entity and strongly believe in a divine entity and believe that they will be judged according to that divine entity, etc., will find that they carry out all aspects of their life subliminally or consciously in accordance with that belief. So us being theists and monotheists at that, and Muslims, depending on how much of a role Allah plays in our lives, we carry out the aspects of our lives dependent upon how we perceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Especially those acts which we carry out, those behavioral acts which we carry out directly with Him, between us and Him, particularly those. But otherwise, all aspects of our life are carried out dependent on how we perceive that one who is watching us and who will judge us and who created us, etc., and how we think about Him. It has been the case that our attitude, cultural attitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been strongly revolving around the fear of Allah. Although the perception of Allah, how we think about Allah, is a theological discussion, its ramifications have permeated into other aspects of our lives and other Islamic sciences, jurisprudence included. Or we can say rather, this fear aspect of our lives, perhaps it is not our theology which has permeated into jurisprudence, but because the jurisprudential sciences in Shia Islam, or in Islam generally, have come to the forefront and have become the strongest aspects of the Islamic sciences, it is the jurisprudence which is shaping the way we think about Allah and is shaping our theology. And so that jurisprudential mindset is one whereby we have duties that we should perform in front of Allah, for Allah. And if those duties are not performed for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that entitles us to punishment, or that warrants punishment. Whether Allah then forgives or not is a separate issue, but we warrant punishment. And therefore, when we have these acts of jurisprudence, they are placed in a way whereby a person would be saved from being eligible for that punishment. Clearing a person, so if you do this, make sure if you're in X situation, make sure you do 1, 2, 3, 4, so you've covered the basis, thereby clearing you from being eligible for punishment. the whole concept of bara'atu dhimma in our jurisprudence absolves a person or clears a person of that responsibility. So having discharged one's duties, now you know that this mukallaf, the one who is charged with duties in front of Allah, after having done 1, 2, 3, 4, is now in the clear. Because of that mindset, we often approach our devotional acts of worship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that attitude. And so we find in the Hajj, for example, the person who is doing tawaf around the Kaaba will rigidly make sure, despite the pushing and shoving, that his or her left shoulder doesn't move from facing that cube. If it moves this way or that way, then he is doomed to having repeating his tawaf, and if he doesn't, then his whole Hajj is not accepted, etc. When he goes to throw the stones at the Jamarat, he has to hit the middle of that wall. Despite the fear of death and the stampede which is going across, he has to try and hit that part, and if he fails to hit that part, then he has to repeat. Or similarly, when we come to the prayer, he has to concentrate, or she has to concentrate in her makharij, so that the whole form of the prayer is correct as Allah would wish it to be. And if it is incorrect in any way, then we have more ahadith to say about the salat and the way we understand them. In qubilat faqubila ma siwaha, wa in ruddat farudda ma siwaha. If the salat is accepted, everything else is accepted. If it is not accepted, rejected, everything else is rejected. So based upon my makharij, all of my a'mal will be rejected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the jurisprudence is set out in this way. I shouldn't forget these are 10 arkan of salat. 5 of them are obligations, 5 of them are rukn, 5 of them are ghayr rukn. I have to keep all of this in mind, and I approach my salat in this way. So with this kind of attitude, with all of our acts of worship, I have a mindset whereby I have to follow that which has been textually ordained in order that I fulfill my responsibilities towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Often that hampers me from concentrating on the spirit of the law itself or of the act. So how does that, or how can that hamper me in my progress towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What impact can that have, especially on those acts of worship? If we take an example of, many of us may have been in that situation whereby we work under somebody. We have a supervisor in the business world, in the corporate world, in whatever sector. We work under somebody as a PA, as a secretary, as whatever. We're about to enter a meeting, and my supervisor tells me, we're about to enter the meeting, 5 minutes. Can you just run over to that kiosk and fetch me a cup of coffee, white with 2 sugars, please? I can't disappoint this guy. My job's on the line. If I disappoint him, X, Y, Z. So I keep repeating this to myself. White with 2 sugars. White with 2 sugars. I go to the kiosk. I make sure it's warm enough. And this way, 1 part of milk. So it's white, 2 sugars only, no more, no less. And I hold it carefully. I bring it back to him. Make sure it's the way he would like it. If not, then if he gets angry at me, then I'm in trouble. It should be white with 2 sugars, just the way he likes it. Yes, I bring a successful cup of coffee to my boss. Compare this to if we go on a long journey with our spouse, for example, on the motorway. We stop at a service station. We're tired after 3-4 hours of driving. We stop at a service station. I know my wife is tired. She sits at the table. I say, what can I get you? She says, please, a cup of coffee, white with 2 sugars. Sure. When I approach that kiosk, Costa, whatever it is, to get 1 coffee, white with 2 sugars, I see there's also a muffin there that she would also like this. She's tired. So with the white with 2 sugars coffee, I also get the muffin and maybe that tuna melt panini. I get it toasted for her as well because she must be hungry. And when I bring it to her, I bring white with 2 sugars. Yes, that's part of it. That's what she asked for. But with that, there's the chocolate muffin and the other parts that she may also like with it. Why? Because there's a relationship of love there, not a relationship of duty. When there's a relationship of love, I present something above and beyond what was asked for with that spirit. When there's that relationship of duty, I make sure the form of what was asked for is exactly as it was asked. Do I, when I approach my salat, for example, have that jurisprudential, fiqhi, or taklifi mindset. Taklifi meaning that which has been charged upon me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, La yukallifu Allahu nafsan. Allah doesn't charge a soul except what is capable of, etc. So this charging, do I enter the salat with this mindset of being charged with the responsibility that I have to carry out? Or do I enter the salat with the mindset of a lover who is about to give my beloved something that they would desire? So is that duty and taklifi mindset that I hold, or is it the love and devotional mindset that I hold? What is the difference? We saw some differences, how it can make a difference. But what is the difference in perception? The difference in perception is so subtle, yet it is so fundamental. Because the faqih, not the faqih, but the faqih mindset, if you like, as opposed to the muhib or the arif mindset, obviously the two can be in one person also, but it's a matter of perspective. The fiqhi mindset looks at the salat. Looks at the salat. Why? Because this is what Allah has desired from me. So my focus is the salat because Allah has desired this from me, so that I look at the method of the prayer, doubts in prayer, prerequisites of the prayer, preliminaries of the prayer, the form of the prayer, etc., etc. This is my salat because Allah desires this from me. Or the Sawm or the Hajj or whatever it may be, because Allah desires this from me. The mindset of the lover, no. For the mindset of the lover, Allah is the focus. And the salat is just the means to get to Allah. But my focus is not the salat. So as for the urafa, as they themselves say, they don't look at the salat, they look at him, but the way to him is the salat. With the fiqh, not the faqih, but the fiqhi mindset is such that the salat is the focus because it's what Allah wants. The mindset of the lover, no, Allah is the focus. So, for example, after I return home from work, I want to return to my beloved family. If I had that fiqhi mindset in returning to the family, I would knock the door opens, then I analyze, make sure the UPVC of the door is clean, and I knocked properly, I knocked in a way that they would like me to knock, and no. The mindset of the lover opens the door and rushes towards the beloved family. The doorway or the door is just a means to get there, but it's not the focus. So when we approach the salat, how much mind are we giving to the form of the prayer, because it's what Allah wants from me? And how much is it of love and hope in my beloved to reach him? Not that the fear of Allah is something bad. Obviously we have in the Quran and the ahadith about the merits of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we have already seen the difference of an act of worship performed by fear and duty compared to that by love. Especially in these holy months, that Rajab, Sha'ban and the holy month of Ramadan is the season of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have a hadith from our holy Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam that he says to his companion Hafs. So, عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام أنه قال لحفص ابن غياث, speaking about the act of worship or the relationship with Allah, he tells Hafs very frankly, يا حفص الحب أفضل من الخوف. الحب, love, أفضل من الخوف. Not that khawf of Allah, we have about khawf of Allah. That is a good thing. But al-hub, love, is far superior, above and beyond fear of Allah. Love of Him is far superior. We already saw the difference of the two types of worship that the two mindsets can yield. The higher level is the level of love, not the level of seeing the form and act of duty that I have to perform in order to absolve myself of punishment. Is the level of hope and love. Also, the great mystics and scholars of Shia Islam, the very recently translated book into English, Al-Haqa'iq fi Mahasin al-Akhlaq, which I believe Shaykh Bahampur is now running courses in teaching that book, or the precepts or the tenets of that book, in it, Fayd al-Kashani says in one of his chapters, "I'lam," that you should know, أن العمل على الرجاء, that an act performed on the basis of hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اعلم أن العمل على الرجاء أعلى من الخوف, is loftier than that deed performed on the basis of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like the coffee example we already saw, if I do it on the basis of duty, I do it in a certain way, and if I do the same act but with love, and all the additional parts are with it, so if someone is doing it on the face of duty, then they get up from ruku and they might say Sami'a Allahu liman hamidah, although that is not even wajib, but that much they might say, and then go to the sajda, making sure they have stood up properly after the ruku, because that pause is required, and then go down so that salat is not hampered in any way and it is accepted, and if everything else is accepted, etc., etc. But the lover, no. The lover who wishes to speak to Allah gets up from ruku, as Fayd Kashani himself gives the example, and he would say, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana, walakal hamd. Then he starts to talk to Allah, Ahl al-kibriyai wal-azama, Ahl al-judi wal-jabarut. Oh, he who has generosity and mercy and grandeur and magnificence, and he goes on and on. Then he would go to sajda. This is the prayer of that one who brings his wife. Everything else with the coffee, yes, there is white and 2 sugars is there, but everything else goes with it is the act of the lover. And if we look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has marketed himself, if you like, in the Quran and the Ahadith, we find it is very little is to do with fear, primarily is to do with love, hope, mercy and forgiveness. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa alayhi salam, Ya Musa, invite my slaves back to me. Ya Musa, build a relationship between me and my slaves. What did he say? Make sure my slaves fear me, because if they do not do what I wish of them, they will enter the hellfire. No. Allah even told Musa, when you go back to Fir'aun, make sure you are layyin, make sure you are soft and gentle with Fir'aun. Allah told Musa, as we have in Tafsir al-Askari, which there are doubts upon its authenticity, but this particular narration has been narrated in other places also, not only in the Shia sources, but ascribed to the Holy Prophet also in the sources such as Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, also in there, that أوحى الله إلى موسى أوحى الله تعالى إلى موسى, Allah reveals to Musa, Ya Musa, build this relationship. How? He says, حبب إلي خلقي وحبب خلقي إلي. Oh Allah, make me, oh Musa, so he says, oh Musa, make me beloved to my creation, and make my creation beloved towards me. Not fear, not remind them of punishment, no. That love relationship, build it between me and my creation. Musa says, Ya Rabbi, kayfa af'al? How should I do this? Allah replies to him, Zakirhum bi ala'i wa na'ma'i. Remind them, not remind them of my punishments and my wrath and how severe I am, no. Remind them of my boons and blessings upon them and my favors upon them. Why? لِيُحِبُّونِي, so that they would love me. So that they would love me. Build this with them. Then Allah goes on to tell him, فَلَئِنْ تَرَدَّ آبِقًا عَنْ بَابِي أَوْ ضَالًا عَنْ فِنَائِي. For if you return one runaway slave from my door, or one person who has gone astray from my courtyard, he tells Musa, if you return one of those back to me, it is better for you, O Musa, than 100 years of worship, being standing in the night in every day of that 100 years and fasting every day. It is better for you than that if you return one person. Who did he say? Abiqan an babi, that runaway slave from my door, if you return him. Musa then asks him, وَمَنِ الْعَبْدِ الْعَابِقْ مِنْكَ? Who is that runaway slave from you? Allah replies to him, Al-Asi al-Murtad. The one who is disobedient, not disobedient, the one who is rebelliously, obstinately disobedient, that one, if you return him back to me with love. So what about us? Yes, we sin. Yes, we are weak. But if Allah wanted to build that love relationship with the one who is obstinately, rebelliously disobeying Him, He tells Musa, bring him. And Musa, remember, was one of the harshest prophets of Allah. Aggressive in his temperament. He tells Musa, return him back in this way. The one who is obstinately disobeying me, not with fear, but we have this culture of fear, and that's entered into the texts we have, like the importance paid upon books like Manazil al-Akhirah, which has some scholarship behind it, or Journey Through the Unseen World, which has very little scholarship behind it, and you wouldn't want to read it on a dark night when you're alone, because it's one of those spooky stories that the darky comes and the dog comes and eats you in the grave. And whereas Allah doesn't teach this. In fact, we have a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. He says, "Inna arhama ma yakunu Allahu bil abd," that the most merciful Allah can be to the slave. إِذَا وُضِعَ فِي حُفْرَتِهِ, when the slave is placed in his ditch, in his grave, that's when Allah will be most here. Allah gave me air to breathe, parents to nurture me, clothes to wear, food to eat, everything. Allah, the Prophet says, when the abd is put in the grave, that's when Allah is most merciful to him. But I enter the grave and the other realm and death with this fear that I'm going to be punished and whipped, and Munkar and Nakir will be ready for me and asking me questions. This is not how Allah marketed Himself. In fact, perhaps we haven't pondered enough on the ayat of the Quran and the ahadith whereby Allah talks about what relationship He wants with His slaves. And so the ayah from Surah Az-Zumar that we refer to at the very beginning of this discourse, Allah says in the Quran, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. يا عباد, so Allah says, يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم. O my slaves, which slaves? Who have أسرفوا على أنفسهم, who have transgressed on themselves, who have sinned. Ajib. In one address, where Allah is addressing the one who has transgressed, that means the one who has sinned, the one who has disobeyed, in that same ayah and the same address, Allah doesn't say, get away from me, or those who have disobeyed me and those who have nothing to do with me anymore and those who I will punish. He says, Ya ibadi, whilst addressing those who have transgressed against themselves and disobeyed Him in the same address and the same statement, He ascribes them and attributes them to Himself. They are my slaves. Yes, they have transgressed. Yes, they may have disobeyed. They are my slaves. Ya ibadi, O my slaves, who have transgressed against themselves, الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ. Now beware of the punishment of Allah, the day will come. No. لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Do not despair. It's a prohibition if ever there was one. Do not despair. Do not despair in the mercy of Allah. Oh, my slaves, who may have transgressed against themselves, do not despair in the mercy of Allah. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. Allah forgives sins, all of them. Innahu huwal ghafur rahim. Indeed, He is the forgiving, the merciful. And on that note, we also have a hadith from our Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, whereby he says that our shafa'ah for our Shia, is amongst the kaba'ir min al-dhunub. Means the major sins. You know, when you look at the category of major sins, it has things like zina and that category of sins and murder, etc. Imam says our shafa'ah for our Shia is on the kaba'ir, on the major sins. Means what? Means on those which are not kaba'ir, our shafa'ah is not required. Allah is too merciful. And in this verse he says, my slaves who have transgressed. So the same statement, whilst addressing those who have transgressed, are attributed to himself, saying, do not despair in the mercy of Allah. Allah would forgive all sins. Who speaks to someone in this way, whereby they may have transgressed and sinned? How do we speak to our fellow human beings who may have sinned and may have transgressed? Watch out, you're going to get the wrath of Allah, and this is the punishment for this sin, and that's the punishment for that sin. Looking at the ahadith, again, this hadith is from Sunni sources and Shia sources. In the Shia sources, it is often ascribed to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, whereas in the Sunni sources to our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Talking about the mercy of Allah, in our sources we have from our Holy First Imam alayhi salam, he says, وَمِن رَحْمَتِهِ, and from amongst his mercy, within his mercy, أَنَّهُ خَلَقَ مِئَةً rahmatan, that he created 100 portions of mercy. So within his unlimited mercy, within that scope, he created 100 portions of mercy. جعل منها رحمة واحدة في الخلق كلهم. Out of those 100 portions of his infinite mercy, he made 100. Out of those 100, he placed one portion of those 100 amongst all of his creation. All of his creation. One of those portions. فَبِهَا يَتَرَاحَمُ النَّاسِ. It is by this one portion of his 100 from amongst his infinite mercy that man is reciprocally and mutually merciful to each other. When you see an act of mercy, that a man extends his hands and gives a piece of bread to the hungry, this is from that one mercy. That a man raises his hand to lift his fellow brother or sister up, that's from that one aspect of mercy. فَبِهَا يَتَرَاحَمُ النَّاسِ. So from that one aspect of mercy, man is mutually merciful to each other. وَتَرْحَمُ الْوَالِدَةُ وَلَدَهَا. It is from that one aspect of mercy that the mother is affectionately merciful to her child. So the mercy of the mother to the child. So no matter how merciful you think your mother was to you, it is from that aspect one portion of mercy, of the 100, which is part of an infinite. وَتَحَنُّنَ الْأُمَّهَاتُ مِنَ الْحَيْوَانَاتِ عَلَىٰ أَوْلَادِهَا. And all the mothers from amongst the animal kingdom show mercy to their offspring. It is from that one portion of mercy. From that one portion of mercy, man is mutually affectionate with each other. From that one portion of mercy, the mother shows affection to her child. From that same one portion of mercy, all the mothers in the animal kingdom are merciful towards their offspring. فَإِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ. When the hereafter comes, when the day of resurrection comes, أَضَافَ هَذِهِ الرَّحْمَةَ الْوَاحِدَةِ إِلَى 99 رَحْمَةً. When the day of resurrection comes, Allah will then add that one portion of mercy back with the 99 other portions of mercy to show man mercy of 100 portions. One portion of it is amongst us. The parent to the child, the animals to their offspring, is that one. On the day of judgment, Allah places them with the other 99 to judge humankind. Recently, I was speaking to someone and he told me he had a checkered past, as we all have, but perhaps he saw his own checkered past as even graver. He told me, Muhammad, I never thought Allah would forgive what I've done in my past. I never thought I would be forgiven for what I have done. I never thought I could be forgiven for what I have done until I had children. That statement and its gravity probably can be only fully appreciated by those amongst us who have children. He said, I never thought I could be forgiven for what I've done until I had children. Because you know when your child comes to you, no matter what they've done, even when you punish them, it is out of love. And even when that child comes back to you after having disobeyed you and after having abused you verbally, and you try not to talk to your child in order to show them a lesson, you're trying not to laugh because when he shows you or she shows you those big eyes and they're sorry, you're trying not to smile because you want to teach them a lesson, but it just comes out and you have to forgive. That's the mercy a parent has towards their child and the love and affection a parent has towards the child, which is just one part or one instance of that one aspect of mercy of 100, which is a part of Allah's infinite mercy, about which Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam asks Allah in the dua we read every Thursday, Inni as'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay. I'm asking you by that mercy of yours which encompasses everything. Allah's mercy is infinite. That parent's mercy to the child is just one ray from the infinite sun of Allah's mercy. And when it comes to his fear, as far as the A'immah alayhimus salam were concerned, even his fear of him was overpowered and overwhelmed by the love of him. As they all said, and it is reported that each Imam alayhi salam recited that invocation of this holy month of Sha'ban, which we have entered, Al-Munajat Al-Sha'baniyah, that the Imam says to Allah, Ilahi, In akhadhtani bijurmi, akhadhtuka bi'afwik. Oh my Lord, if you perceive me by my crime, I have perceived you by your pardon. So if you look at me in that I have sinned and committed a crime, I perceive you with your pardon, so you should act with me in that way. Ilahi in akhadhtani bijurmi akhadhtuka bi'afwik. Wa in akhadhtani bidhunubi, if you see me by my sins, akhadhtuka bimaghfiratik. If you perceive me by my sins and the plethora of them, I have perceived you by your forgiveness. وَإِنْ أَدْخَلْتَنِ النَّارِ, and if it is the case that you were to fling me into the hellfire, وَإِنْ أَدْخَلْتَنِ النَّارِ أَعْلَمْتُ أَهْلَهَا أَنِّي أُحِبُّكَ. If you were to cast me in the hellfire, I shall inform its inhabitants that I love you. This is how Allah wants to be perceived by His creation. This is how He wants to be acted with by His creation. In fact, in that same book that we already discussed, Al-Haqaiq fi Mahasin al-Akhlaq, Fayd al-Kashani says about that love and fear of Allah, even that fear is governed by love. That you don't want your beloved to be disappointed with you and to be displeased with you, which makes you it's that fear. It's not fear that I fear He's going to fling me in the hellfire. He is too merciful for that. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says in that same dua Kumail, that were you to put me amongst the flames of the fire, and were you to do this, and were you to, what does he say at the end? This is not the perception we have of you. This is not how we think of you. It's not how Amir al-Mu'mineen thought of Allah. But even then, that fear is governed by love. As that Fayd Kashani says in his book about a wise man, قَالَ حَكِيمٌ, he said, that a wise man once said, مَنْ خَافَ شَيْئًا فَهَرَبَ مِنْهُ. Whoever fears something, flees from it. When we fear something, we flee from it. مَنْ خَافَ شَيْئًا هَرَبَ مِنْهُ وَمَنْ خَافَ اللَّهَ هَرَبَ إِلَيْهِ. But whoever fears Allah flees to Him, not from Him. Even that fear is governed by love. And the man of tonight, whose birth was tonight, if we remember just a couple of words from his famous opus of a supplication that he made in Arafah, Imam Hussayn alayhi salam tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as part of his dua Arafah that we have, أنت الذي أزلت الأغيار عن قلوب أحبائك. It is you, he tells Allah, who brought down or removed, rather, all others from the hearts of your lovers. So it was you who removed all others from the hearts of your lovers, حتى لم يحبوا سواك, so that they would not love anyone but you. وَلَمْ يَلْجِئُوا إِلَىٰ غَيْرِكَ, that they would not turn for protection from anyone but you. So this was what Allah wanted from mankind, was to love Him, especially now in this holy month of Sha'ban, which Allah has placed and surrounded. As Imam Zayn-Al-Abideen alayhi salam says in his famous invocation at Dhuhr time of this month about Sha'ban, the month of Sha'ban, الَّذِي حَفَفْتَهُ مِنْكَ بِالرَّحْمَةِ وَالرِّضْوَانِ. It is that month which you have encompassed and surrounded with mercy and with your pleasure. So very quickly, to recap, 1, we are likely to function in all aspects of our lives, consciously or subliminally, by how we perceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what view we have of Him. Number 2, our jurisprudence, being very duty-minded, has affected our theology, which makes our relationship with Allah such that we should fear Him. Number 3, the act of love is far superior than the act of fear, as we saw with the coffee example. Number 4, the focus should not be on the act of devotion. It should be on the one who should be devoted to, or the beloved. The act is just a way to get to Him, like we said with the doorway and the household. Number 5, primarily above and beyond everything, Allah has marketed or publicized Himself to be beloved, merciful, pardoning and forgiving. Not one who should be feared and ought to be feared and is wrathful, etc. And lastly, number 6, the Imams often expressed their own relationship with Allah in a love relationship manner, very seldom in a fear relationship manner, and when they did so in a fear relationship manner, it was governed by love. So we raise our hands on this night marking the birth of our third holy Imam alayhi salam to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to view him and perceive him as the beloved as He intended, that our acts of devotion to Him should carry so much more spirit and so much more fruit, and we should ascend and soar to Him in a much more wonderful manner. وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآله.
We have some time for questions from either side. We have some questions from either time for questions from either side. So from sister's side first, or from the brother's side.
Assalamu alaikum. This question of the balance between form and substance, right? Sometimes when you go too much towards substance, then the form is neglected. So we have people who say there's no need to have formal prayers. I have enough hope of Allah to suffice. So where is the line between the two?
The one who loves Allah gives Allah or brings to Allah what his beloved desires. So we had the coffee example when my wife says I want white with 2 sugars and I brought her everything else with that white with 2 sugars. If I brought her the muffin and the tuna melt and XYZ without the coffee, white coffee with 2 sugars, it's not what she required or not what she asked for. But because the driving force is love, that aspect of what she wants comes naturally. So the one who says, well, I love Allah enough, I don't need to do the formal prayer, but Allah has asked for the formal prayer. How I dress that up and embellish it with all the extras and the nawafil, and how I decorate that prayer itself with dua and the khushu and the behavior of a faqir is all within what he has asked. But if I don't give him what he's asked in the first place and I say I have love, the substance actually is not there without the form. the problem which I was pertaining to, and we have amongst Islamic historians of modern history, that fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to see it, and due to financial situations, etc., out of all the Islamic scholars, the scholars of ethics, and the theologians, and the philosophers, and the jurists, out of all of every Islamic science we have, the jurists have come to the forefront because of social reasons, financial reasons, etc. And therefore, jurisprudence has come to the forefront in such a way that now we know in the Islamic seminaries what is taught is fiqh and usul. Everything else is peripheral. What we want is fiqh and usul. Fiqh and usul, as important as it is because it gives you the form, is only restricted to the form and has nothing to do with the spirit. And so I'm left with a skeleton with no flesh. And that needs to be addressed.
Any other questions from the sister side or brother side?
Those who are awake understood everything perfectly.
Assalamu alaikum. You mentioned about Prophet Musa, that he was very harsh or harsher than the other prophets. What brought you to make that sort of...
We have some indications from the ahadith and from the Quran. When Musa came back from the mount, he saw his people disobeying. He came ghadban asifa. He came in a very enraged manner to his people. One, we have other ahadith, how Musa addressed this one, how Musa addressed that one. How Musa, from the Quran again, when he saw two people fighting, he struck one of them and he died on the spot. Musa was an aggressive fellow. Not every prophet and imam has had their own temperament. Isa alayhi salam, in contrast, was a very soft individual. As again we have in the hadith and from some Quranic indications. So from the hadith and Quranic indications we have that Musa was more a manifestation of the Jalali aspect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas Isa and others were more a manifestation of the Jamali or beatific aspects of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So from the Quran, as he came back in this way, he spoke this way, Allah had to tell him, be layyin with Fir'aun, don't be harsh, otherwise he won't accept you. He was scared that I've killed one of them. He actually did kill one of them, and he just struck him only once and he died. He came back across the mountain, ghadban in that way. So we have indications from Quran and Hadith about his temperament, how he was. Which is a commendable thing for himself, and all of us, as we have from not a hadith but a Sufi tradition, that every person, the path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, enumerate the number of breaths taken by mankind. So anyone is to reach Allah according to his own temperament. From the Quran, kullun ya'malu ala shakilati. Everyone acts according to his temperament and disposition. So that was his disposition. And Isa had his own, and our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had his own, and all of our Imam alayhi muslim had their own, and we each have our own temperaments and dispositions.